Today, we're going to talk about self-sabotage, why we do it, what it looks like, and how to overcome it.
Your someday starts today. It's time to explore and test the newest science, methods, and trends for creating a life you love with your host, Tanyamfk. Welcome to My Designed Life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to My Design Life, where we learn the latest science, tips, tools, and strategies for you to create your best life every day. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Tanyamfk, and on the My Design Life Show podcast on all available streaming sites. I'm your host, Tanya Marie Figueres Kreisinger, more easily known as Tanya MFK. And you are here to learn not only how to create your best life, but how to live it now. And I'm so thankful that you showed up. Now, my guest today is a board-certified registered nurse turned wellness and wholeness advocate and coach. She's been on the front lines of healthcare for 6 years when she found herself in total burnout. Her life was completely arranged around others' needs, which she would later learn was a pattern to avoid herself. And ooh, how many of us stand in that nobility of everyone else comes first, only to find ourselves drained and resentful. Hello, my overachievers. We are going to learn some stuff today. So, upon coming to the conclusion that conventional medicine was disappointing, she began a search for deeper healing. So through the process of examining from the inside out, she uncovered the hidden cycles of self-sabotage, learning a process to let it go and freeing herself to reach the goal she's always dreamed of and create the life she always desired. Here today to teach us how to do the same, please welcome Nurse Coach Bry. Welcome, Coach Bry.
Hello, Tanya. I am so excited to be here.
Yes, I am super excited to have you here to dive into this topic. It's something that I think gets discussed and tossed around a lot. And maybe we recognize it, maybe we don't, but we also don't know what the heck to do with it. So with that said, as we start today, I really want to dive into the concept of self-sabotage itself. Because like I said, while people know it, they hear it, I think it's hard for a lot of us to believe that we really do it. I mean, I want all these great things. Why would I sabotage myself? So can we please begin with what it is and what it looks like?
Totally. Absolutely. And I totally agree. Self-sabotage is this word tossed around often. And what would first come to mind for me and maybe for others is the standard, maybe looking to escape in external ways, whether that's drinking or food or smoking. But what I found for myself, self-sabotage showed up in behaviors like people pleasing and perfectionism, and being in a career where I took care of everybody else. It was just a way to put myself lower and lower on that priority list.
So when we're self-sabotaging, there's something that's ideal for us to do, but we find, would you say, distractions or other things to focus on that keep us from what's best for us?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it feels good for us to say that you care so much about other people and you want things to be perfect and you want friends and people to like you. So you get into this practice of abandoning yourself. And in that is the sabotage, because as you're becoming more and more disconnected to yourself through acts of service for other people, well, again, we're moving lower and lower on that priority list. And that can only go on for so long.
Yeah. So it's a way of kind of avoiding what needs to be looked at.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I should probably really deal with this. Why am I always trying to people please? Or why am I always trying to make others happy? But I don't have time for that. I need to take care of some people.
Right.
So in that case, that's like our idea of sabotage. And I think I've seen, I saw a quote from you that said something to the effect of, we did not come into this world knowing how to self-sabotage. We created the behaviors to meet a need or feel safe.
Absolutely. And that's usually what's underneath that. We didn't, as you just said, we didn't come into this world knowing these ways. We learned them at a very young age to meet a need and feel safe. And what I found in my journey and what I see a lot in clients is underneath these people pleasing is this fear of rejection or fear of abandonment, or the perfectionism can go very much hand in hand with that. Like what's that fear if it's not perfect, if you don't get it right on the first time, or you're perfecting this thing you want to create so much so that it never even gets out into the world, because where is perfect? It just doesn't exist.
Right.
So if we can get to the root of what fear is underneath that, what belief is underneath that, why did I learn to be that way? Why did I need to create that sense of safety? It begins to untangle this story and this narrative we've been living our entire lives.
Yeah. As I think about what you were saying about let's take fear of abandonment. So for us to be aware enough to notice that that's even what it's about, right? Like that's almost level one. Most of us don't even recognize that that's what it is. There's just something in us that is people pleasing, right? And so if we're people pleasing, we're trying to make sure that everyone's happy, usually that everyone's happy with us. And so the assumption there is that if they're happy with us, they won't leave, because them leaving would mean something. But we've never taken the moment to actually stop and examine, like, well, what would it mean? What's so wrong with that? What's the concern, right? So that's kind of how we're avoiding the real issue at hand, but a lot of times not even knowing that we're avoiding it. It sounds really like powerful, yet like so confusing. Like, do you find that people are like come to some level, like are at a level of awareness when they come to you, or are you just like uncovering this and they're like, oh my God, I never saw that?
Yeah, usually they come to me knowing that something isn't working, and they don't really know what it looks like to make it work or what's underneath that. But they know something's not right. Because you hit, as I did in my journey, you hit just this wall of burnout, and you're just looking for anything different, because so much of for myself, so much of my identity was wrapped up in these things, especially in the nursing world. Like I was a caretaker, I was a caregiver. That was very much what I got paid to do. And then outside of that, that's how I arranged my entire life. I cared for everybody else.
You're like a professional people pleaser.
Yeah. And it was making me money.
But it was really keeping you from dealing with something that was deeper than that, right?
Absolutely. So I find my clients don't necessarily know what that deeper thing is. But they come to me curious.
They know there's something there, just not what they know. They're not like, I guess, traditionally sick. They don't have a cough, they don't have a cold, but they're like, something here isn't right, and you might be able to help me figure that out, right?
Right. And as you mentioned, like symptoms like a cough and a cold, what's just coming up for me is the alignment there of getting to the root of it, and that alignment of how that's not what conventional medicine does either. It's very symptom based, and it can be that way in our life too, in looking at the symptoms, or just looking at the external of like, this thing isn't working, and maybe even taking on the victim mindset, but like getting deeper into what that root is, what that fear is, where did we learn that, and really like almost just like pulling that root from where it started, and taking an honest look at disconnecting a bit from that, and having some compassion with ourselves for being in tune enough to create these behaviors, to have this sense of safety and security, but really being empowered to choose otherwise.
I love that you brought that up, that having some compassion for recognizing or acknowledging that we even were able to create this sense of safety, that in many ways, and I've heard it said, I always forget his name. My audience knows by then I'm terrible with like the names, but his name is Shirzad something, and he is the author of Positive Intelligence. And he talks about self-sabotaging behaviors. And one of the things he first starts out by discussing is that they served a purpose and they were very practical at a certain point in our lives. There was a time where it helped us when we were in either non-supportive situations or through our childhood or things like that. So I know that a lot of these do come from a true place of safety, but there does come a point where they switch. They're no longer helping us. They are in fact sabotaging us, right? They're in fact doing the opposite of what we originally unknowingly created them to do. So I always thought that was such a powerful thing to recognize, and that you brought up that compassion for that, because someone may go, oh my gosh, and like feel this terrible thing, but you didn't come up with it because you're like, how can I mess up my life? You came up because it served a purpose. There was something for it, right? So if people are here and they're listening to us and they're like, okay, the self-sabotage thing, like I see that it's a thing, you know, it is real. But how, if most aren't aware of those habits, like let's go down a path, like what's the first step to, I guess, perhaps maybe awareness, and then what happens after that? Maybe we kind of go like almost like a sample version of what a client would go through with you. So how would they first start to recognize, like, maybe I need to talk to somebody? Like, what are they seeing? What's showing up in their life?
Mm. So it's this chronic abandonment of ourselves, because in this self-sabotage, it's usually, as we said, various acts of service to other people and focusing on the world outside of us. And once we recognize, like, okay, these behaviors aren't working, where did I learn them? And as we've spoken about getting to the root of those, a lot of those are looking at our relationships with mom and dad. And this isn't to shame any parents or to point fingers or anything, because we're all doing the best we can with the tools we have. And to go a little bit deeper, just because when I first heard this, I was like, whoa, mom represents our relationship with self as we grow inside of mom and physically connected to mom in the womb. And then we're born and we're handed to dad, and dad's our first energy outside of ourselves that we feel. And dad represents the world. So these two relationships at the very beginning of our life teach us how to be in relationship with ourselves and how to be in relationship with the world. So a lot of the beginning foundational work with my clients is coming to that understanding and that concept of where we learned these things and how that's shown up in our life. If mom never prioritized herself and put everybody before herself and was kind of checked out emotionally, is that showing up in our life?
Right. Is that what you're doing as well? Is that how you see how you need to show up? So before we move on, so that's like kind of the first couple steps. So I want to bring us back. If we're noticing behaviors that, just like you said, aren't serving us, and we talked about the people pleasing, which I think for a lot of the overachievers and entrepreneurs and things that watch this show and are here with us looking to create their best life, I think that's something we can recognize a lot. I wanted to also bring it back to something that I feel is like maybe a little more black and white for people to look at. So you mentioned in the beginning, when we're trying to avoid ourselves, it may be like drinking or something like that. So I feel like that's an easy one to look at, to go, okay, I've been drinking, I'm drinking a lot. Then I'm recognizing this, I'm waking up the next morning going, well, this, I don't like that I did this. This isn't the great thing. I really need to stop. I want a different life. I know this isn't serving me. And then that habit comes in, and then they go out, they meet after work or whatever, and they're having the drinks again. And then it just becomes this cycle, right? And so they're getting to that point, at that point where I guess, and we're not going to like alcohol and anonymous level maybe, but it's like, they're just recognizing that they know they don't want to do this. It's not at the point of level of addiction, but they're like, this habit's not serving me. And like, I'm stuck in this cycle. So then they reach out to go, how can I find out what I'm really dealing with? Why am I doing this behavior? Every time I say I don't want to do it and I'm doing it. So now they find someone like you and they talk to you. And now the conversation, you kind of start to, I guess, dig into that behavior. And one of the first places then after identifying, well, it looks like the drinking is the behavior that's here for this reason. Do you go exactly from there into, okay, let's look at your relationship with the parents, or is there any step in between?
I love that you brought this real life example in, because no, not necessarily. And in something like that, like, let's, again, the behaviors are usually serving us to some extent, even if we're waking up in the morning like, why do I keep doing this? So from that point, I would start asking deeper questions. When does that urge to pour the bottle of wine come out? What is it in that moment? Is it a conversation? Is it a person that cut you off in traffic? Is it what triggered that thought and that desire? And from that point, say it's a conversation or an argument you had with your partner. Well, what was missing there? Is there something that you were holding back? Is it something that needs to be said? Is there a need that's not being met? Is there a deeper desire you're not speaking? Really uncovering what's driving that behavior.
Right. Because that, not saying the thing that the conversation, right? Like you said, maybe there was a fight and you didn't say what you wanted to say. This was a way of avoiding having that conversation, because now you can have your wine and be like, it's fine, who cares, or whatever the situation is. So you dig into that. So I'm loving just kind of uncovering this process. So we've kind of identified, like, here's the behavior I don't like. We're recognizing, ideally, and we're self-aware enough to go, I want to do something about it before it comes a problem where I'm, AA is the next step. Ideally, I've come here. Now you've dug into it and you're starting to figure out the triggers. Like, when does it show up? When does it happen? When is it really? So you're really bringing in this real life experience for them to notice when it's happening. And then I'm assuming that based on those answers, that's when you're starting to dig a little deeper to go, well, when are those first starting, which tend to go back to the parent-child relationship, right?
Exactly. It all kind of comes full circle again there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to bring this up because I know I come from a counseling family. My grandmother was a counselor, and there's always this kind of joke, like the old psychology jokes, like, oh, I'm sure it's about my childhood. and so for those of you who are probably like rolling your eyes or thinking like that, like, the truth is that's where our foundation starts. That's where we come from. And the same cultural backgrounds that you have, the same reason that as a Mexican, I love tortillas, like, it comes from these foundations, you guys. So if any of you are like, oh, does it really come down to that? It does. I mean, it really, really does. It does every single little thing necessarily have to connect back to that? Can we change and adjust? Of course. But I think it is so important to see where these unconscious beliefs came from that we assume to be true, assume to be the way they are. You really hit a nail for me when you mentioned, like, was the mother selfless or always doing stuff? And that was definitely my mom was that overworked, overachieving, always doing something for someone else. And I went through my own sense of burnout because that's what was modeled to me. That was what was normal. Like it or not, I could look at her and judge her, but then I end up doing the same thing. And so, right, coming back to those places is so important. So I love that you do that. I just want to throw that out there for any of my, like, oh, are we really here? Again, in the audience. Yes, we are, because this is what it takes to really undo and rewire this great life that we're talking about creating. It really takes laying the foundation. It takes going back. You can't always just slap a new coat of paint on the house. Sometimes we got to go back. We might have to tear it down and like put the new foundation on there. Now you just own the land, we're starting over. So, so I love this. So we've done this. We're kind of coming, you're digging into this. Now, is this, I noticed when I was doing research on you and stuff, you talk about reparenting. Is that like the next step, or is this part of the reparenting, or maybe we can dive into what that means?
Yeah. And I want to speak this thought before I forget, as you were talking about, like, maybe people are like rolling their eyes and like, do I really got to go back to all my childhood wounds? And and I just want to say, if that's you, like rolling your eyes and kind of being like, again, that's our triggers are our teachers. And like, that's probably a sign that there's something there.
We gotcha.
Something there to get a little curious about.
I love that.
But yes, this concept of reparenting, it was a huge like light bulb moment for me when I hit that wall of burnout, and when I started to get curious as to like what are my options here, because we're adults now, and we still have that inner child within us, no matter how old we are, no matter where we're at. That inner child is the emotions and the desire to play and have fun and create, and we are able to recognize these patterns and those relationships that created the life that we're living today, and we can now be our own parent as our adult selves. We can meet our younger selves, and we can meet ourselves in these moments now, and give ourselves the parenting and the compassion and the support that maybe we needed in those younger days that we didn't get, or the ways that were modeled to us at that point that we can now recognize are not serving us. So yeah, it's this concept of just recognizing the parental roles and relationships, and then deciding that, okay, now I can mother myself.
Yeah, it's amazing. So let's connect those things. So we've come to the space of identifying where these habits, behaviors, beliefs, triggers, traumas, whatever version, level, and depth that they may be, that come from those earlier stages of foundations. We've recognized them. We've played with them. You're meeting with Coach Bree here, and she's like pulling it out, and you're like, oh my God, it's all this. And then the question is, well, then what, right? It's great to be aware of that. But what do we do? Do we go and say, hey, mom, remember when you did this? That was messed up. Like, that's not bringing us much, is it? We can't go back to that age and redo that. So we can't do that. We can hold a bunch of blame. We can at least understand where it came from. But it sounds like the reparenting actually brings us to a place of action of what we can do now. Like that really is that next spot, right? So we can go, here we are, here we see it. And I'm always interested in that, because awareness is beautiful. You know, I come from the place of meditation, and I lived in the Shaolin Temple in China. I've done these lists of self-awareness, mindfulness, but it really isn't the full step, right? There's a lot of times we become aware of something like, oh, that's why I was a jerk. It doesn't stop there. We have to go, well, how do I now not be a jerk moving forward? How do I change my jerk tendencies? And I use that in jest, you guys, but I mean, as whatever your situation may be, to go, well, it's great to be aware of it, but we need to move to the next step. And in the specific parenting situation, we can't go back in time. There's not a lot of space. So this concept of reparenting allows us to, it sounds like, kind of rewrite the story and the trigger by supporting ourselves through that. Would that
Absolutely.
be fair to say? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you brought that rewriting, because that's the empowering, and that's the integration piece there. As you said, the awareness is great, and recognizing all of that. But now what are we choosing, and how are we taking action going forward? And again, maybe this will trigger an eye roll for people, but like, how can we be present in those moments when we want to be a jerk, when we want to people please, when we want to stay and perfect everything to the moment? Or maybe it's reaching for the bottle of wine. How can we zoom out a little bit and be that observer of like, ooh, there's that tendency again. What's that? Can we connect that to anything? What do I need in this moment? Just those pieces of just the awareness to kind of zoom out, be the observer there, and check in with yourself, and what's arising for you, what do you need, and how can you tend to yourself in that moment?
Yeah, well, I think this is where that awareness absolutely is serving us, because if we've worked with someone like you who's brought it up to the surface, and shown us probably something again we may have been aware of to a certain degree, but really laid it out like, look, it's coming from this. We visited back to those wounds. We've identified the areas that we can heal and reparent, as it's called, this relationship and these pieces. But now it's like, now what happens in everyday action? Well, now that I'm aware that the tendency to have the glass of wine that'll take the edge off, means I don't have to think about yelling in traffic, or that maybe I wasn't so nice to that person. What is it that makes me not want to do it? Now I can become aware of the connection, at least, and recognize that connection more. So I know you mentioned like the eye roll and then the presence. And I think if anyone's listening to me this far and like presence and mindfulness is driving you nuts, you probably are watching the wrong podcast or the wrong show here, because that is a huge part of it that consistently from the people we've had on is that this self-awareness is the main way that how do we even recognize what self-development is if we're not aware of where we're at? How do you develop something that you don't know where it is?
Exactly.
So if we're there, having to identify and now we're more aware to question the behavior, to question like, oh, I learned that there's a reason I do this. So what's the reason I'm doing it now? And I love that, getting curious, because I think a lot of us think, well, I already know. So then what now what? But it's like, well, get curious in that moment. What is it in the specific moment? And there's a wonderful book that just came out, written by Dr. Adrienne Yodim, called Hungry for More. And it's very similar in this concept that she discusses it specific to weight management and weight loss, that hunger, opening the fridge and going like, what, are you actually hungry? Or is there something else that you want? Are you hungry for more? Is it that, and you think hungry for more, like, I'm going to get more done. No, my overachievers. It's not about that. It's hungry for more of going like, is it that you're really hungry for food, or there's something else going on? Is it this distraction? Is it emotional? Is it boredom? Is it stress? Is it like, I just had this crazy meeting and now I'm going to grab the wine or grab the chocolate? Like, what is that?
Right.
So, but it's bringing back to that awareness of, why am I doing this right now? And that really is the power. Like, what are my actions? Why am I slamming the plate down, whatever that is? So I love this. So if I was to recap where we are, we've recognized there's a behavior we didn't like. It wasn't serving us, thus perhaps not knowing that that's what we would later find out to be self-sabotage. We go to speak with someone like you, and you start to help us connect, what it is, what those triggers are. We even go further back to identify the foundations of how we started this belief or got there. We start to play with now how to rewrite that story, how to we change our behaviors through a process of reparenting, how we can show up for ourselves, maybe where we weren't supported before. Then we start to become aware of why we're doing things. We get curious. And then are we like amazing, or do we graduate from it? Do we ever really learn, or what would be that next step?
Yeah. So leading up to all of that process that you so beautifully went through, usually a lot of clarity comes from that, because this isn't serving me anymore. These are limiting beliefs. They're holding me back. So what do I really desire? What do I really want to create now that I've had this awareness and I have this deeper connection to myself and my emotions? What do I desire in relationships, in work, in play, in fun, and in just what, to go right along with the show here, how do I want to design my life? Yeah. And that looks like quite literally breaking down all those different areas. And if a visual helps, like in the vision board scheme of things, and to be aligned with that, continuing to meet ourselves every day. And in that also, like tools and practice wise, meeting ourselves every day, dropping into our body and our emotions, and very much rewriting the script through affirmations and continually listening to that and exposing ourselves to that, and looking at our environments around there. So we really get into this process of designing our life.
Yeah.
now that we've realized all of this is no longer.
We recognize what it is. We got curious. And then the word that I keep hearing come up in my head is like replacing. It's like
Mm,
we take that thing we were doing and now we're replacing it with ideally something that does serve us, right?
absolutely.
A habit or a process or something that when that trigger comes, we have a new reaction. We've replaced it. So maybe it's
Yes.
not grabbing for the wine, maybe it's grabbing for the water, maybe it's having a moment. And you said something there, which I'd love to dive into with the little time that we have left here, is dropping into our body. Can we go into that? Because I know for some it might sound a little woo-woo. How do I drop into my body? What does that mean?
Yeah. And I completely understand those that are like, this is woo woo. What does that even mean? Because I was absolutely the same way. And because I didn't know how to drop into my body, I was the person opening up the fridge, getting the spoon and going in the peanut butter jar because I was like, ooh, I feel something uncomfortable. This is going to taste good for a second. And
Get
we'll
that
we'll
dopamine
suppress. We'll
release,
suppress.
dopamine of peanut butter. My God, I think some of you guys can imagine it right now.
Yes, that creamy deliciousness. Yeah, so this concept of dropping into our bodies, and what's coming to mind for me is Joe Dispenza. He says thoughts are the language of the mind and emotions are the language of the body.
Hmm.
And often we have an experience or have a trigger and we label it with that made me angry, that made me anxious, whatever that is. And what really is the feelings are the language of the body. So if we can drop into our body and kind of put the emotional label to the side and just pause for a moment and note, where is this coming up in your body? Is it a tightness in your throat? Is it a heaviness in your chest? Maybe a pit in your stomach? And really just, again, getting curious in that and seeing if you can fully describe it. That's a lot of what I do with my clients. We really drop into the breath work and really get descriptive into what is the body telling me.
Hmm.
And
I love
there's
that.
information there.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need to give it an emotional label and then stay in our heads and create a story and go around and around. Just dropping in, because emotions are energy emotion. So if we can tap into what that energy feels like in our body and get into a practice of moving it through, well, that's the way through, the only way through.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a great explanation. Because again, I think we hear that like drop into our body and some of us get it. And some of us are like, well, I'm in my body. Like, what do you mean drop into my body? And it reminds me of those times where if anyone's shown up to, I'm going to use another example that people might roll their eyes at, but like going to yoga and they'll say, okay, drop your shoulders. And you like, you do. And you're like, I didn't even realize my shoulders were like this until they say
Mm,
drop. And you're like, oh, I can drop my shoulders. Like,
right.
oh my gosh. Not because there's so much that goes on in our bodies subtly that we're not aware of. We don't notice the tightness. We don't notice the clenching. We don't notice so many things, which comes back down to the awareness. So when we say it's dropping into our body, it really comes back to taking a moment to scan and be aware what's really happening, what's really going. And I love that. I haven't heard that Joe Dispenza quote, but that the emotions are the language of the body, thoughts are
Mm,
the language of the mind, and the emotions are the language of the body. And so really identifying what is happening. And that's why we say, like, I have a gut feeling or
yes.
butterflies in my stomach. And these old sayings are coming from physical reactions to our emotional state. Right. So it
Yes.
is something
Yes.
worth exploring. And then don't make me go into like all the science that's behind great stuff. Our guts, our second brain, and all, the way
Oh,
our
right.
CNS service works, system works, all these great things. But so as we've come down this channel, we've come down this road that I've, explained a couple of times, it sounds like when we start to come from awareness and we move into action, the action consists of the reparenting, the action consists of the curiosity and awareness, and eventually comes to replacing. And
Mm,
once we've come to replacing, My assumption is that we work on the new thing that we haven't dealt with yet. But at least for that road, we've somewhat come to a pretty healed space in that road, at least, right? For that path. And then we can then work, because we're whole beings and multifaceted. I'm sure there's some other things to work
Right.
on and to do. But I
Right.
mean, does that sound like a good kind of summarization of like how this process works and how we would really ultimately overcome self-sabotage?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the way you put all those pieces together and brought to attention like the next thing. Like life is still happening. It's not like we decide to go down this path and everybody else is just waiting at the finish line for us to be healed. And
I'm fixed now.
you know, yeah.
Ready to go.
Exactly. So it's this, if we're going to go back to like the practice of like pausing and dropping into our body and all that, that can be maybe in your morning ritual, but that can also be as you go to get that bottle of wine and pausing for a minute, or as you're in that conversation and you're noticing your heart rate's picking up and can you just pause for a moment there and just drop into your body and get out of that story and that scenario you've already built in your head. Yeah.
Well, and let's be honest, some of you guys, some of us might be drinking the glass of wine and we can still be aware then like, why am I drinking this right now?
Oh, totally.
It's not too late. There's always a space for awareness. So anywhere that you are in that path. But it's, I think this is such an important topic. It's something that is not unique. We all have something that we've are dealing with. We all have our triggers. We all have our places. But if we stop there, then we don't experience what it's like to also have the other side, the fullness and the joy of not having those triggers. So I think this is that beautiful bridge of saying, yes, this is normal. Yes, it's there, but yes, I have the power to step into it, to do it differently, to live it differently, to not be I don't want to say, for lack of a better term, say a victim of it. You know, we can bring in power into it and then direct it and design it the way that we want. And so, thank you so much. Before my last question, can you please tell everyone like where they can find you, what you have going on, how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. So I love Instagram. My handle is Nurse Coach Bry. You can reach out to me. I mean, get into my DMs. I love having conversations and connecting with people through there. And from that point, I do have a group program that will be beginning at the end of this month that is doing all of this work. And I also hold meditation circles weekly where I guide you in this practice of dropping into your body. So yeah, find me on Instagram and we can connect deeper.
I love that. And you also have like clarity calls that they can connect with you and even just kind of have a conversation and see if the next step is to do some work with you, correct?
Absolutely. We can always connect one-on-one and dive a little deeper.
Love that. Well, so for my last question, what is one thing that the audience can do this week, like in terms of taking action to work towards overcoming self-sabotage? What's one good practice or habit that is attainable and accessible, even in after they finish watching this?
I want to say that practice of dropping into your body. And I know, again, we're maybe getting some eye rolls, but if you know the people pleasing and the perfectionism and the numbing out in whatever way isn't working for you, drop into your body in those moments when you feel that desire to jump into those behaviors. Ask yourself a little bit deeper of questions as to why that's coming up, and just seeing where in your body can you feel that desire.
Just become the observer when the emotions arise.
Absolutely.
Love that. All right, you heard it, guys. When you feel that, what is happening, what's going on, instead of going, well, I'm just mad, I'm just angry, I'm just sad, forget all the labels and go, my heart's racing or my throat's tightening. And I wonder why that is, right? That's the curiosity place.
Exactly.
So I love that. Get out of your head, get into your body, find out what it is. And then when you're ready, go get in touch with Coach Bry so you can start getting on the path to make this happen. Because as much as you've learned the process here and hopefully been able to empower you to move you through this and overcome it, truth is, as we all know, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and accountability is so, so powerful. So knowing that you have someone in your corner is really the best way to make sure that you get where you want to go. So thank you so much for being here. Is there any last thoughts, words, ideas that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I'm just so grateful to be here and to have this conversation with you. I love these deeper conversations. And yeah, if you are watching this and you're maybe like, oh shit, I'm doing all these things, I just want to bring it back to the compassion piece and offer you some forgiveness and some compassion that you started and learned these behaviors to meet a need. And now you have the ability to learn something else.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. You guys, make sure to get in touch with Coach Bry on Instagram at Nurse Coach Bry, and on Facebook. I know she's on Bryanna Reilly, but like she said, she's an Instagram gal. But if for some reason you're not, you can find her on Facebook as well. And as always, you can connect with us at Tanyamfk on Facebook and Instagram. You can DM or comment below to be our guest at one of our Success by Design trainings and learn more about our courses, workshops, and coaching to grow your business and create a life you love at tanyamfk.com. Now, if you like this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow and be notified when our next one is up by clicking that button now. And remember, someday doesn't exist. It's time to take action now. So make today the best day of your life. I'm Tanyamfk, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. My Design Live is a Tanyamfk production. You can catch us every week at 1 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. London on the Tanyamfk YouTube channel. Do you have a method, tip, or hack you'd like to share or explore? Suggest a topic or submit to be a guest by visiting our website at tanyamfk.com.